And naturally, I'm a Tottenham man, obviously. I can reflect back to being a player with and manager of some of the finest players that have ever been in the game.
The place is fantastic, the tradition of this club.
To be the manager of 3 cup-winning teams here, I'm so lucky, it's untrue.
Hotspur America podcast, airing every week during the English Premier League season.
What a glory, glory night at White Hart Lane. This great and historic football club.
Joyful night down the Tottenham High Road.
Hotspur America, the original US-based podcast dedicated solely to Tottenham Hotspur Football Club.
Is Gascoigne going to have a crack? He is, you know. Oh, it's there! Schoolboy's own stuff.
I hate Arsenal, just hate them.
Oh, what a goal! Unbelievable! Wow, this is incredible.
We're the Yids in America.
Dempsey's there to tap in.
What a fantastic run! He scored! Alex turned home. Eric Dyer.
This is your Hotspur America. Episode 5 of the Hotspur America podcast, and we have a very special guest joining us this week. But before we get to him, I want to go around the table and introduce the guys. Sam, how are you, my friend?
I am well. Excited to be here.
Good, yeah, me too. It's going to be a really good show, I think. And Simon, how's your week?
It's good, mate. It's been a banner week for me.
I know it has. Congratulations.
You have had a great week. Congratulations, Cheers.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Rock on.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, rock on, literally. That's going to be great. I'm really happy for you. And joining us from Sky Sports, the journalistic side of things over there, is Lyall Thomas. Lyall, how are you doing?
Good evening. Very good.
Thank you. And you're in London right now, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, in my home in West London. So
beautiful.
Just chilling out on a nice, cool Sunday. It's getting a bit cold over here at the moment. So
I think we would all like a little bit of cool weather. I know fall's starting to creep in central Missouri, but I think Dallas they're still embedded in 100-degree weather and upper 90s and all that good stuff.
It's a freaking inferno.
It's an oven here today. It's like 95 degrees with about 95% humidity. It's brutal.
It's brutal for you. I'm jealous though. I wish you'd have a bit of that right now. That sounds good to me.
Well, everybody's going crazy here, Lyle, because next week we're supposed to be in the 80s, so that's considered a cold front here.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then it'll snow, and then it'll be blistering hot the next day again.
Yeah, we got a lot of that.
Such as Texas. Again, we got some questions we want to talk to you about, or ask you about rather, and I'm going to start off and just give a few, talking about your journalistic careers, your journalistic career rather. What are your responsibilities as a sports journalist, first and foremost?
Responsibilities. I think responsibilities are down to the individual journalist. Obviously I have my responsibilities in my job. There's things that Sky look for when they hire journalists, and there's things that they like us to do. But I think my responsibility is to be honest at all times. I know journalists have a different reputation depending on the person. Especially in England, people are, I think, very cynical about journalists sometimes, especially sports journalists, because the way that the industry is. But I take it upon myself to be honest at all times, and if that means telling people what they don't want to hear, then that's just the way that it is. And I think that's I think that's evident if you look at how I'm received on Twitter sometimes.
Right.
I think
you
can tell. But
we're all received kind of hit and miss sometimes, just depending on our voices and our opinions. But
exactly.
You can't please them all.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. But no, it's my responsibility to find out what's going on, whether whatever club that is, whatever sport that is. I so happen to specialise in football. I suppose so happen to have a few particular clubs in London that I have very strong contacts with, and that puts me in a position where I can report objectively and with strong information to the people who want to know, and that's what my job is, and that's what I'm paid to do.
So because you have different contacts at different clubs, are you solely a Spurs reporter, or do you in-depthly cover other clubs as well?
Other clubs as well. So I began obviously my career in London. So that's my beat, I guess you call it. In London we call it the beat, and so my beat is the London clubs. London is where I live. London is where I can get to. And so I started working as a journalist when I was a student. I was a student at the University of Westminster studying journalism, and I started working for a news agency called the Haters News Agency, which is quite a renowned sports news agency that used to be on Fleet Street. Mm-hmm. Very, very good reputation, more 50-year-old reputation as being one of the best in training young journalists. So I started there when I was a student, and I used to go there on my days off when I wasn't in university. I wasn't needing to do any studying, which was rarely anyway. So I used to take up my free time, go there and learn from those guys. I started match reporting for them when I was in my first year. So I started working at very small clubs, all the lower league division clubs. So like places like Barnet and Leyton Orient and Dagenham and Redbridge and Brentford and these types of grounds, and I guess learning my trade from there, you see. So I started with them, and then I moved on to something called West London Sport, which is a local regional news, online news provider who covered the West London clubs. So they cover QPR and Fulham and Chelsea and Brentford, and so those are the 4 clubs that I've worked on specifically for quite a long time. And then as I worked my way up and met different people and made certain contacts, it just so happened that when I joined Sky, I was in a strong position journalistically, and things started to come my way regarding Tottenham and a few other clubs as well in London that were kind of outside my beat at that particular point. So since I've been working at Sky, basically, I guess you could say my clubs are Tottenham, Fulham, Brentford, and then a bit of QPR and Chelsea.
Was there a certain person or influence, whether it was your school age years or something maybe even as a young adult, that was your catalyst in deciding to become a journalist, or was this something that just organically happened?
That's a good question. I think there's a few people who I would say are responsible. And I use the word responsible for me becoming a journalist, because if it goes badly, then I'll hold them responsible. But no, I'm kidding. I think my dad definitely. I mean, my dad he was a football fanzine writer. So I don't know if you know about the football fanzine. It used to be very popular in this country years and years ago. So when he started, I actually grew up in the north of England. I grew up watching Chesterfield, and he was the Chesterfield's fanzine editor. So every time we used to go and watch Chesterfield, I would stand outside the ground with him for maybe 2-3 hours before kickoff, and he would be selling the fanzines, you see, and he would spend all week putting these fanzines together, meeting with fellow Chesterfield fans and talking about the issues at the club and writing about them, and writing very, very intelligently and informatively and comically as well at the same time. I was very into that at the time. So I think when I finished school and I was thinking about what I wanted to do, writing about sport and writing in that way about sport seemed to be the logical thing for me. It seemed to be something that I could get very passionate about and get very interested in. So I decided to go and do a degree in journalism, and then it's really kind of snowballed from there. Really, it really hasn't been a moment's breath where I've actually been able to kind of stop and take stock of what's happened, I guess, from the start. But journalistically, I think that the person that I could not necessarily owe my career to, but somebody who I look up to in a big way, is a gentleman by the name of David McIntyre, who's he's in charge of West London Sport. He's a former BBC journalist, one of the best they've ever had, and he decided to set up West London Sport when the BBC moved to the north, moved to Manchester from London. He decided to set up West London Sport and train some young journalists, and he took me under his wing and I guess taught me many of the things that I know now. So,
can you kind of guide us through a typical day for you, as far when you wake up, what all is entailed as far as getting started, how a story presents itself to you? Is it something that you do on your own? Does an editor look at you and say, I want you to go cover this? And also how a typical match week differs from what we just finished up with the last week of the transfer window, and what that entails for you and different journalistic approaches.
Well, I mean, it's very my day is different depending on the day. I mean, I can't ever give you really a routine. I mean, things are very, very different. I mean, I obviously do a certain amount of shifts on the news desk at Sky, which is per in my contract. So, I work a certain amount of my time at Sky, and therefore my role at Sky is to be on the news desk at all times and writing news copy for the website and the mobile apps and the tablets and things like that. That's what my job is. And then aside from that, it's also to be an investigative news reporter, so to be finding out what's going on in the world of football. And so I guess from my point of view, it's about, at the moment, it's looking at the clubs that I cover and looking at where I'm in a good position, I guess you could say. And what I mean by good position is, am I in a good position to be able to write informatively and truthfully about a particular subject with regards to a certain club? And that means, do I have the facilities to be able to find out what's really going on? That's what I'm kind of going on about. So, if there is a story being reported, it could be by a newspaper, it could be by someone else online, then I guess I'm in a position where I can find out whether it's true or not, if it's regarding a certain club. And then it's also my job to look ahead and see what may or may not be happening in the future. So that's looking at things like, outside of the transfer window, that's looking at things like injuries. So that's looking at, which players are out, which players aren't out, and finding out, who's been training well during a week, who hasn't been training well, who might be unavailable for the game of the weekend, who is available for the game of the weekend, who might be coming back, that kind of thing. Obviously during the transfer window, it's really all about transfers. So, most of my day is really spending time on the phone and trying to establish really what's going on. And it's very much an organic thing, I think, that happens. You don't really have to think too much about most of the time. The world of the Premier League there's always something going on. So whatever club it is, there's always an issue where you can be investigating. There's always something.
Right.
And if there isn't something, if you know your club, then you know what the next issue is, or you know what the supporters want to know about. So my day is very much taken up by trying to find out, what the supporters want to know about. So it's very much getting inside the head of the supporter is what my job's about, and thinking about, well, what do the guys want to know about today?
Right.
Whether that's conducting an interview with somebody. So if you look at the issue with Tottenham at the moment, I guess one of the most talked about issues is how the two new signings are going to fare in the attacking positions. So Heung-min Son and Clinton and G. So for me, it's thinking about, well, how can I convey that to the supporters? How can I convey how those guys are going to get on? Is there anybody that I can interview who might be able to shed some light on how they're going to get on? Somebody they've played with before, or somebody who knows them, things like that.
Right. So in your heart of hearts, to digress just a little bit, you talked about your dad writing for the fanzine in Chesterfield. Mm-hmm. Is Chesterfield the club that you support, or are you a Tottenham supporter, or do you have a club that you have a certain affinity to?
I knew you guys were going to ask that.
Careful here, Lyall. Be very careful how you answer.
I'm being very, very, very careful. I have to be.
He's going to say the Woolwich, isn't he?
No, because then there'll be a doubt.
Show's over.
I can safely assure anybody that's listening that I'm not an Arsenal supporter.
Yeah.
Not at all.
We can pretty much tolerate almost anything else. So.
Mm-hmm. Listen, it's I have to remain impartial at all times.
Sure.
And that's my job, and I will always be. But as I said to you before, I grew up watching Chesterfield, so as you can imagine, they have a very special place in my heart. And also, my family are from Tottenham, so I can imagine you can understand that the club has some sort of meaning to me as well. So I'll go as far as to say that.
Does it cause any issues with journalistic integrity when you cover a club that you kind of have a close affinity for?
No, not at all. Not at all, and it shouldn't do either. I think, if you are aware of yourself and you're aware of your own your job and potentially your own importance within the job, there's no way that your own feelings towards a club should get in the way. I mean, it's about being objective. It's about being impartial at all times. And I mean, obviously, I can only speak for myself at this particular point, but I make it a responsibility of mine not to get caught up in the emotional side of things, if that ever becomes
right.
part of it.
But how difficult is that? I mean, are there times where that becomes more challenging than others to stay impartial?
League Cup
try
final.
it? Yeah, to try and kind of wade through the muck. What's really when you're being fed a line versus really being told the truth.
Well, I mean, it's part of my job, not just to. I mean, it's not a journalist's job to be a megaphone for other people. If you see what I mean by saying that, it's not my job to be somebody that just relays what other people are saying
right.
at face value necessarily. it's a journalist's job to be able to read between the lines. It's a journalist's job to be able to look at that and think,